Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I never used to get rattled by staying at someone else's place. I moved around a lot after high school, couch hopping between friends, renting crappy rooms above garages, working odd jobs. So when my neighbor asked me to stay at his place for a few nights, I didn't think twice. His name was Walt Brenner, a retired truck mechanic who lived alone on an old property outside Crescent Ridge, Oregon. Walt's place sat on a clearing, a quiet patch of earth surrounded by pines so tall they made the sky feel narrow. He'd slipped at work on his porch and blown out his knee, so the hospital kept him for surgery and monitoring. Before the ambulance took him, he grabbed my arm and said, "Kid, do me one favor. Watch my boys for me. They don't like being alone out here at night." By boys, he meant his two cats, Pip and Sherman. I'd lived next door for a little over a year, and Walt had always been decent to me. He'd bring over leftovers sometimes, wave from his riding mower, even fixed my busted alternator last winter without taking a dime. So of course I said yes. But I didn't know that saying yes meant stepping into one of the worst nights of my life. The first night seemed normal enough. I got to Walt's house just before sunset. The air smelled like fir needles, wet dirt, and something sweet drifting off the river a few miles down. The place looked peaceful. A single-story cabin-style home with a sagging porch, a shed leaning like it was contemplating death, and a back deck screened in with old mesh that rattled when the wind hit it. Pip, the smaller gray cat, meowed at me as soon as I opened the door. "Yeah, hey buddy," I muttered, kicking off my shoes. "I know, dinner time." Sherman stared from atop the fridge like I'd offended him simply by existing. I fed them, checked the windows, made sure the lights worked, and then sent Walt a message. Me. "House looks good, cat's fed, don't worry about a thing." Walt. "Appreciate ya. Don't let Sherman bully you. He thinks he owns that place." I laughed, set my phone down, and sat on the couch. The house had that soft, dusty quiet you only get in old homes. It was peaceful, maybe too peaceful. I'd grown up in a loud city. Silence made me antsy. After a while, I turned on the TV for background noise. Some rerun of Deadliest Catch washed over the room. I cracked open a grocery store iced tea and settled in. Nothing felt wrong. Not yet. Most people think being alone in the woods means peace. No neighbors, no noise, no drama. But living out here long enough, you start to notice things city folks don't. Silence can hide a lot. My first month after moving next door to Walt, I heard a scream one night. A blood-chilling, raw-throated scream somewhere out behind the tree line. It was 1 a.m. I'd stepped onto my porch with a flashlight and scanned the dark. Nothing moved. No animals. No wind. No crunch of leaves. Just silence swallowing up the sound. The cops later brushed it off as probably a cougar, but I never fully bought that. I'd heard cougars. They scream, sure, but not like that. And Walt had once quietly warned me, "Don't wander too deep out there after dark. Folks get turned around. Sometimes don't come back right." He never elaborated. I didn't ask. But all that only came back to me later, when everything had already gone wrong. By 11 p.m., I was exhausted enough to sleep. Walt's only bedroom smelled like liniment and old blankets, so I crashed on the living room couch, pulling one of his quilts over me. Pip hopped onto my stomach and began making biscuits. Sherman, as expected, ignored me completely. The house settled into nighttime quiet, the fridge humming, the occasional tick of the water heater, the slow creak of cooling wood. I remember thinking, this place is way too quiet. And then, around midnight, squeak. I frowned and lifted my head. The cat flap in the kitchen had moved, but Pip was curled on my chest and Sherman was asleep on the recliner. I brushed it off. Probably wind, probably nothing. Then, squeak, squeak, squeak. This time it wasn't the soft swing of a door catching a breeze. It was something pushing against it. The hairs on my arms rose. I whispered, "Pip?" The cat didn't move. Neither did Sherman. I sat up, every muscle tight. "Hello?" No answer, just the faint tap of plastic flapping. My brain tried to rationalize. Raccoon. Maybe a raccoon. But raccoons don't test the flap repeatedly like they're trying to figure it out. Then came the faint scrape of something brushing the floorboards near the door. My pulse kicked up. I stood from the couch, eyes locked toward the kitchen. "Anybody out there?" My voice cracked. I hated that it cracked. Another squeak came, but this one was slow, intentional, like the door flap was being pushed in carefully. I inched toward the counter that blocked my view. And then I saw it. The nightlight in the hallway cast a faint glow across the cat flap. In that glow, an arm pushed through. Not a paw, not fur, not an animal. A human arm. Long, pale, dirty. The wrist was smeared with something dark. Mud, maybe. Maybe blood. Fingers thin and shaking as they stretched inside the kitchen. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. The hand groped blindly for the inside knob. The fingers brushed it. And that's when I realized the sick truth. Whoever it was already knew where the lock was. This wasn't random. They'd done this before. My heart thudded so hard I thought it would crack a rib. My mouth went dry. My legs felt numb. I backed up a step, but the floor creaked, and the hand froze. The arm stiffened like whoever it belonged to was listening. My breath caught. Then slowly, the fingers began stretching for the lock again. Something inside me snapped. Fear turned into something sharper. Survival. Walt kept a two-pronged grill fork on the counter, one of those big ones used for flipping steaks. I grabbed it without thinking. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling. "Get the hell out." The arm didn't stop. I didn't think. I stabbed downward, aiming just below the wrist. The metal sank in with a thick, sickening resistance. The scream that followed wasn't human in the normal sense. It was rage and pain twisted together, echoing off the porch walls. The arm yanked back violently, jerking the fork so hard it clanged against the wood. Another scream, louder. Pip bolted under the couch. Sherman jumped high enough to nearly hit the ceiling fan. I stumbled backwards, gasping for air. Footsteps thundered across the porch. The screen door slammed so hard the frame rattled. I darted to the back window and flicked on the outside floodlight. A figure sprinted across the yard, tall, gaunt, moving with a weird limp or stumble, disappearing into the tree line like it knew those woods intimately. I didn't think, didn't wait, didn't breathe. I scooped both cats into one carrier. They yowled and flailed, grabbed my shoes, keys, and phone, and tore through the house. My hands shook so violently I dropped the keys twice before unlocking the garage door. Once inside the car, I jammed the button to close the garage, praying nothing slipped under before it sealed shut. Then I floored it. The gravel spit behind me as I shot down the road toward my place 6 miles away. Only when I reached my driveway and locked my own door did I finally call 911. The dispatcher asked, "Sir, are they still in the house?" "No," I said, voice breaking. "But they tried to get in. They stuck their arm through the cat door. They tried to unlock it." "Stay on the line," she said calmly. "Units are on the way." When the cops arrived, I told them everything. They asked 1,000 questions, height, build, clothing, but all I could say was, "They ran. That's all I know." By morning, the officers went to Walt's place. They said the screen door wasn't broken, no forced entry, nothing stolen. But there were blood droplets by the step where the intruder had yanked the fork out. They put out an alert to hospitals. Nobody came in with a stab wound. Nobody called in suspicious activity. No tracks, no trail. When they brought a K9 unit the next day, the dog followed the scent to the woods, and then stopped abruptly, circling with confusion like the trail had just vanished. That detail bothered the cop deeply. "People don't just disappear mid-trail," he muttered. I kept the cats with me until Walt came home. When I told him the story, the color drained from his face. He whispered, "Thought I heard someone out there a few weeks back. Tapping on my porch one night, figured it was just critters." Then he looked at the woods and said under his breath, "Damn place feels wrong sometimes." I didn't argue. I moved out 3 months later. I still don't know who or what reached through that cat door. But sometimes when I'm trying to sleep, I hear the flap in my memory, that soft little squeak, squeak, squeak. And I wonder if they're still out there, and if they ever came back to test the door again. I never thought the worst stretch of my life would begin with a Facebook message from a man I barely remembered. Back in early May of 2011, I was 24, broke, recently dumped, and running deliveries at a tiny sandwich shop off Old Highway 14 in Ridgeford, a small kind of forgotten town in upstate New York. I had bills stacked like Jenga blocks, car insurance, overdue phone plan, and rent for a crappy studio apartment above a hardware store that smelled constantly like paint thinner. Backstory short, I was barely hanging on. So when I got a message from Mr. Ellis Rourke, my old sophomore English teacher, my first thought was, man, why the hell is this dude texting me? I hadn't talked to him since high school, and even back then he was weird. Not in the harmless, quirky teacher way, but in that, why is he standing so close when talking way? Everyone used to call him Dusty Ellis because he always looked like he had just crawled out of a storage attic. Sweaters full of lint, glasses smudged, voice thin and papery. But he messaged me like we were old friends. "Hi, I heard you're still local. I need someone responsible to house sit. Easy money. Interested?" Responsible. Nobody had called me that in a year. I replied, "Depends what you're offering." He messaged back instantly. $450, water plants, bring in mail, light cleaning. Just 2 nights. $450 for 2 nights? Hell yes. I didn't even pretend to think. I typed, "Yeah, I can do that." He said he'd leave $250 on the kitchen table and give the rest when he returned. Said he'd be out of state visiting a friend. No details, no questions. Just an address I had never been to. I should have known something was off. Nobody pays that much for someone to water plants. But when you're broke, red flags start looking like decorations. His place sat on the far edge of Ridgeford, basically on the last street before the woods swallowed the road. The kind of area where houses sat half a football field apart and the silence felt heavy. The house itself looked old, like 1950s old. Faded blue siding, porch light burned out, mailbox dented. A big maple tree covered half the front yard, its branches hanging low like they didn't want to let anyone inside. The key was under the mat, just like he said. Inside, everything smelled like old books, dust, and something faintly medicinal, like old hospitals. His kitchen table had an envelope. Inside, $250 cash. All right, I muttered to myself. One small win for a broke dude. I put on music from my phone, started watering plants. He had way too many, like jungle levels, and cleaned the downstairs. Honestly, the house bored the hell out of me. No TV, no computer, just stacks of newspapers and old Victorian furniture that looked like sitting on them would give you tetanus. Night came fast. I set up my sleeping bag in the guest room and tried sleeping. But every 5 minutes there was some noise. Creak, tap, soft shuffle, like someone shifting their weight on old wood. Old houses make sounds, I told myself. But at 2:41 a.m. exactly, something made me sit straight up. A long, slow dragging sound came from the hallway, like fabric sliding across the floor. I held my breath, listened. It stopped. I talked myself out of leaving. You need the money, man. Just chill. Eventually, I slept. I headed home for a shower, breakfast, and to clear my head. When I came back around noon and walked into the guest bedroom, something was wrong. First thing, a smell. Not strong, but off. Like stale sweat and something metallic. Second, my sleeping bag was not where I left it. It wasn't dramatic, just rotated maybe a foot, but enough that my stomach dropped. I said aloud, "Okay, nope, something's weird here." But again, money, bills, consequences. I tried brushing it off. I cleaned the upstairs, bathroom, hallway, Mr. Ellis's study, which creeped me out instantly. He had walls full of old photos, but none of family or friends, just random people. Some kids, some teens, some adults, all candid shots, nobody smiling. A few looked like they didn't even know they were being photographed. I didn't like that one bit. I backed out of the room and closed the door. I refused to sleep upstairs again. I dragged my sleeping bag downstairs, set up on the living room floor, and watched some cable TV he surprisingly had. Old school channels, but still better than silence. Around 10:55 p.m. I turned off the TV. The house instantly felt too quiet. Wind outside, but no cars, no neighbors, just the creaks of old wood settling. I wrapped myself in the sleeping bag and tried to drift off. But then, click, the sound of a metal doorknob turning from the pantry. My eyes opened instantly. I told myself, probably the house shifting, maybe the AC pushing a door, something normal. But deep down, I knew. I turned my head slowly toward the kitchen doorway, and then I froze. A figure stepped out of the dark pantry. Small, thin, bare legs. It was Mr. Ellis. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to come back until the next day, and he wasn't wearing anything. Except socks. His skin looked pale, almost gray in the dim light. His glasses were gone. His eyes looked wide, unfocused. He didn't see me. He walked silently, eerily silently, past the living room doorway and went upstairs. Every hair on my neck stood up. I whispered to myself, "Oh, hell no, hell no." I grabbed my phone, keys, shoes, didn't even tie them, and slipped out the back door, moving like a ghost. But as I looped around to the front to get to my car, my brain started spinning. He lied about leaving town. He was hiding in the house. He was in the pantry. Why the pantry? What else was he doing? I sped home, heart pounding so hard it felt like my rib cage would crack. I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Okay, I'm house sitting and the owner said he was out of state, but he wasn't, and I saw him. He was hiding inside his pantry, and I don't know what he's doing, but he shouldn't be there. Sir, slow down. Are you saying the homeowner returned unexpectedly? He didn't return, he never left. He's been hiding in there. He came out half naked. I'm telling you, something's wrong. They sent a patrol car. I met them outside his house 10 minutes later. The night was cold, quiet, and unreal. 2 officers walked up and knocked. Mr. Ellis opened the door, but he wasn't naked this time. He was wearing my sleeping bag wrapped around him like a robe. Officer Harris asked, "Sir, we got a report about you being inside the house unexpectedly." Ellis said in this whispery, trembling voice, "This is my home. He's lying. He's trying to steal from me." I yelled, "What? Dude, you told me you were leaving town." Officer Harris asked, "Can we take a look around?" Ellis tried saying no, but his voice cracked. The officers walked past him. They went into the kitchen. I followed cautiously. One officer opened the pantry door. Inside was a butler's cupboard, a hidden side space built into the wall. I never noticed it. Inside that cramped hideaway was a thin mattress, empty food wrappers, water bottles, and a small digital camera. Officer Harris picked it up and pressed play. The preview thumbnails. My stomach dropped. Pictures of me. Dozens. Me vacuuming, me sleeping, me bending down to tie my shoe, me brushing my teeth in the guest bathroom. Officer Harris muttered, "Jesus." I backed up and nearly tripped. Ellis stood there watching us. His expression didn't look guilty, or scared, or angry. He looked disappointed, like getting caught ruined some long, slow game he'd enjoyed. They cuffed him. I showed them the entire Facebook message trail, the money, the instructions. They placed him in the cruiser. As they took him away, he turned his head and stared at me through the window. Expression blank, eyes glassy, mouth slightly open. I still dream about that stare sometimes. He made bail the next morning. That alone scared me enough to file a restraining order immediately. But before the court date ever came, something happened. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Officer Harris. He said, "You might want to sit down." Ellis was dead. He'd gotten rear-ended at a stoplight by a delivery truck. The impact wasn't huge, but he apparently had a heart condition nobody knew about. He collapsed before paramedics even arrived. I didn't know how to react. Relief? Fear? Guilt? All I knew was, the guy who watched me sleep died wearing someone else's seatbelt. I never went back to that house, never picked up the rest of my money. Didn't want it. Sometimes in dreams I see that pantry door open again, and I see his pale legs stepping out, and I hear that faint dragging sound across the floor. Part of me wonders, what would he have done if I hadn't woken up? What was his plan for the next night? I'll never know. But sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night at my new apartment, I swear I hear something from my closet. A faint shuffle, a quiet breath, and I have to remind myself he's gone. Probably. I never thought the quiet would betray me. Growing up in Hawthorne Ridge, a tiny rural patch in northern Georgia that barely showed up on maps, silence was something you learned to trust. My mom used to say, "If you hear the woods talking, it's just the wind, baby. Nothing out there wants trouble." I believed her for most of my life. By 17, I was old enough to be left alone when my parents traveled for work, but still young enough to feel that childish comfort of thinking the world was mostly good. I lived with my older sister before she moved out, and with my brother Caleb, who partied way too much and thought responsibility was optional. My parents had flown out the same morning for some conference down in Miami, leaving me alone for 3 long nights. That would have been fine, if it weren't for the way the woods behind our property always felt like they were hiding something. My house sat about half a mile off Redwood Creek Road, surrounded by tall pines and oaks that creaked like old bones when the wind hit right. At night, it got so dark you couldn't see your own hand without a porch light. Cars barely came by after 8 p.m., and the closest neighbor was a woman named Mrs. Callahan, who was always on her porch at dawn but asleep by 10 sharp. That night, with the whole place to myself and the woods humming their usual low, uneasy song, I should have known better than to invite friends. But boredom does dumb things to your brain, especially when you're watching horror movies alone. So around 9:20 p.m., I texted, "Me. Yo, you guys awake? Come chill. House is creepy as hell tonight." My 2 closest friends, J. Jordan, a loudmouth jokester, and T. Tess, who pretended she wasn't scared of anything, both replied instantly. Jordan, bet. On my way. Tess, gimme 15. Don't start a movie without me. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang loud enough to make me jump. Bro, relax. Jordan laughed as he stepped inside, brushing off dirt from his boots. You look like you saw a ghost chewing on your porch. Shut up, I muttered. Woods were loud tonight. Sounded weird. Yeah, welcome to Hawthorne Ridge, he shrugged. Tess arrived next, waving a bag of chips like a trophy. Let's watch something stupid and scream like toddlers. We loaded a new horror movie, threw blankets on the couch, and for about an hour everything felt normal. Laughter, chips, dumb jokes, cheap jump scares. But then the power flickered. Just once. Just enough for the TV screen to stutter and the room to go dim for a split second. Tess froze. Did y'all see? Old wiring, Jordan said confidently. Relax. But the pit in my stomach didn't agree. My house didn't usually flicker. Not unless something... No, I told myself. Don't go paranoid now. After the movie ended, we stepped out onto the upstairs balcony because the breeze was nice and the moon looked stupidly bright. The night smelled like pine and damp earth. Typical country night mix. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. Then something snapped in the tree line. Not a twig, not an animal scurrying, It sounded heavy, human. Tess turned toward the sound. What was that? Probably a deer, Jordan said, but his voice dipped at the end like he didn't believe it himself. Sounded too close, I murmured. Before anyone could argue, another sound drifted out of the woods. Footsteps, fast, more than one. Hold up. Jordan leaned forward. That ain't no deer. Tess whispered. That sounds like running. The hairs on my arms rose. Then the running got louder, pounding across leaves and branches from multiple directions. Okay, nope, I muttered. Nope, nope, nope. Give me the flashlight, Jordan said. It's inside, Tess whispered, already backing up. You go get it, Jordan told her. No, you go. Both of you shut up, I snapped, panic sharpening my voice. Tess, go get the damn light. She ran inside. Jordan and I stayed frozen, listening as the footsteps grew louder, faster, closing in on us. What the hell is that? He hissed. I don't know, man. Then the running changed direction, no longer coming from the woods but from around the side of the house. Dude, I whispered. Someone's coming. No, more than one. Then a voice whispered from the dark. Hey. Jordan grabbed my arm. Nope, nope, nope. Inside now. Move. I didn't even yell this time. I just ran. We bolted inside, slamming the balcony door so hard the glass rattled. Tess came rushing down the stairs, flashlight in hand. What happened? Someone's out there, Jordan gasped. Multiple someones. Before he finished, a loud bang echoed from the back door. Tess jumped. Oh my God! Another bang, harder. Someone hitting the back door like they wanted to break it off the hinges. Jordan ran to peek, but the blinds blocked everything. Don't open it, I hissed. Then, bang, bang, bang from the front door. Tess screamed as the knocking turned into slamming. Jordan spun. Dude, why the hell are there people at every door? Before anyone could answer, bang, bang, bang on the garage side door. 3 separate entry points, 3 separate people. Possibly more. My heart hammered so loud I thought the people outside could hear it. Upstairs, I yelled. We sprinted up and I dragged them into my parents' walk-in closet, big enough to crouch in but suddenly too small to feel safe. My hands shook as I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Hawthorne Ridge, I stammered. My house. People. 3 people. Trying to break in. Please, please. We already have units en route, the operator said calmly. Your neighbor called. She saw 3 masked men come out of the woods behind your house. I felt my stomach drop. Of course Mrs. Callahan saw them. She always noticed everything. Please hurry, I whispered, choking on fear. We're close. Stay quiet. I hung up and called Caleb. He picked up mid-laugh. Bro, what's up? Caleb, I whispered, voice breaking. Someone's in the house. What? Wait, slow down. 3 men. They're banging on everything, they're trying to get in. That's when we heard it, glass shattering downstairs close. Tess covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. Jordan whispered, no fucking way. Then we heard laughter. Deep, male, twisted. Tess's breath hitched. Please, please, not this, please. The men's footsteps thudded across the hardwood floor. Then they started coming up the stairs. I felt myself shaking so violently I thought I'd pass out. Jordan pulled me into a tight grip, whispering, stay quiet, stay quiet, stay quiet. Footsteps got closer. Tess sobbed silently. Someone outside the closet whispered, check in here. Then, sirens, blasting through the night. Footsteps bolted down the stairs at lightning speed, shouting. Officers yelling commands. A minute later, the closet door swung open, and a police officer aimed a flashlight at us. You're safe. Come on out. Slowly. I collapsed into Jordan's shoulder, unable to move for a second. Downstairs, 2 men were pinned on the floor, zip-tied, grinning like they loved every second. But the third one wasn't there. He escaped back into the woods. My stomach sank. The relief was sharp, immediate, but incomplete, because danger was still out there. Caleb rushed home minutes later. We called Tess's and Jordan's parents. They arrived shaking. The police told us to pack bags. "We don't know where the third suspect is," one officer warned. "We recommend you don't stay here tonight." So we stayed at Jordan's house for the rest of the week until school resumed. When my parents came back, every window in the house was broken, but nothing was stolen. Not one thing. When the police dusted for prints, there were none. It was like they wore gloves the whole time, or like they didn't care about taking anything, just about scaring the hell out of us. My dad decided we were moving to Atlanta, somewhere busy, somewhere not surrounded by trees. I didn't argue, but some nights, when the wind hits the pine trees just right, I swear I still hear footsteps and laughter coming from the woods, waiting, watching, knowing they were never caught, knowing we escaped, barely. I never liked being alone in that house, even when I was a kid. Something about the place always felt like it was waiting, like the walls held their breath when the sun went down. But back then, my dad always laughed it off and said, "Kid, this house is older than your grandma's lies, of course it makes noise." That was before I grew up, before the clown craze, before the summer where everything changed. My name is Landon Hale, and this happened when I was 16, in a small town called Red Cliff, Washington, the kind of place tourists don't stop in unless they missed their exit. The house sat at the end of Sycamore Lane, surrounded by pines that blocked most of the sunlight. 2 floors, narrow staircase, creaky floors, windows that rattled whenever the wind blew too hard. The kind of place where silence had weight. Inside, the layout was simple. Front door, straight into living room. Straight ahead, small hallway right turn, kitchen left turn, downstairs bathroom, at the end of hallway, staircase, upstairs, straight ahead, my room, left, my parents' room, right, upstairs bathroom. I'd walked that layout so many times it was basically printed into my bones. My parents weren't dangerous people, but they weren't exactly stay home with the family types either. They were travelers, always chasing new cities, new restaurants, new reasons to leave. I used to be angry about that as a kid. Now, I was used to it. So when they told me they had a week-long trip to Montana, I didn't argue. Dad tossed me his debit card and said, "Order food, don't burn the house down, don't invite your dumbass friends over." I laughed and said, "No promises." That trip was supposed to last 7 days. It didn't. It was the 4th night when things got bad. I was watching the news, boring small-town stuff until they ran a piece about the recent clown sightings. Everyone had heard about them. Social media was full of videos of weirdos in grease paint chasing cars, staring at porches, lurking near schools. I shook my head and muttered, "People are seriously out of their damn minds." My stomach growled, so I ordered Chinese takeout. Crab rangoon, fried rice, orange chicken, the comfort meal of every stressed-out American teenager. When the food came, I headed upstairs with the bag and my soda. I set everything on my bed, popped open YouTube, and ate like I hadn't seen food in 3 days. Then, mid-bite, I heard it. A crash. Loud. Downstairs. Like someone dropped a bowling ball. I paused the video. "Probably the damn cat," I whispered. Except, we didn't have a cat. My throat tightened. I grabbed my phone, slid off the bed, and crept to the top of the stairs. The lights downstairs were still on. I always left them on when home alone because I hated how dark the place got at night. From the top of the stairs, I had a perfect view of the living room, and standing there, with his back to me, was a man dressed like a clown. But not the costume store kind. This one was filthy, torn in places, stained with dirt and something darker, and in his right hand was a machete. My heart felt like it stopped beating. For a moment, I actually wondered if I fell asleep and dreamed the whole thing. Then he turned just enough for the overhead light to hit the side of his mask. White face, smeared red mouth, cheap wig. But his eyes weren't hidden behind painted lids. They were real, wide, dark, searching. I swallowed a gasp and ducked back before he could look up the stairs. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone. I forced myself to move quietly, slowly tiptoeing to my parents' room since it had the sturdiest lock. I shut the door softly, locked it, ran into the bathroom, locked that too. Then I climbed into the bathtub like it was a damn bomb shelter and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency? My voice cracked. I swallowed, then whispered fiercely. There's someone in my house. He's dressed like a clown. He has a machete. Please send someone. Stay on the line with me, okay? Are you safe right now? He's downstairs, I whispered. I don't think he saw me. As if on cue, the house creaked. Slow, heavy footsteps on the floorboards. Then the sound of someone opening and closing cabinet doors downstairs. He was searching for something. Or someone. Me. The operator asked me something, but I couldn't focus, because the footsteps got louder, closer, moving up the stairs. Every step sounded like doom. Thump, thump, thump. He paused at the top. I covered my mouth so my breathing wouldn't give me away. Then he walked toward my parents' bedroom. Then, bang. He hit the bedroom door, hard. Hey, the clown shouted. His voice was hoarse and furious. Open up! He hit it again, and again. Each slam made my bones vibrate. The bathroom lock, thin, cheap, wouldn't stop him. The bedroom door wouldn't stop him long either. I made a choice that didn't feel like a choice. I opened the small window above the tub, crawled through and jumped. I hit the ground harder than I expected. My left foot twisted painfully, but adrenaline kept me moving. I sprinted across the backyard toward the nearest neighbor's house 2 properties down. My lungs burned, my foot throbbed, but I kept running. Halfway down the road, flashing lights turned the night blue and red. Police cruisers sped toward me. I waved both arms like a maniac. They stopped, and I practically collapsed against the first officer. He's inside, I gasped. He's inside. He has a machete. Please. The officer yelled something to his partner, and they raced into my house. Minutes later, they dragged him out. Handcuffed, screaming nonsense, mask gone. His real face was worse than the clown one. Wild eyes, cracked lips, dirt smeared across his skin, like he'd crawled out of a grave. I never learned his name, I didn't want to. My parents rushed home early the next morning. They hugged me like they hadn't seen me in years. But that wasn't the end, not even close. After the break-in, I couldn't sleep without the lights on. I kept imagining someone standing at the bottom of the stairs staring up at me. The house felt tainted, like something had followed me home even after they arrested the guy. A week later, something new started happening. I was sitting on the couch late at night, lights off except the TV, trying to distract myself with some comedy show. That's when I heard it. A low, slow whistle from behind the couch, right near the window. At first I froze, thinking it was the TV. Then the whistle came again. Soft, human, deliberate. I stood up so fast the remote fell to the floor. What the hell? I peeked through the blinds. Nothing. No one. I stepped outside onto the porch, telling myself it was probably just the wind hitting the siding wrong. But the air outside was still. Then, from the tree line at the back of our yard, the whistle came again. Same tune, same slow rhythm. I shivered. Yeah, nope, I muttered, hurrying back inside and locking the door. I didn't sleep that night. 2 days passed without anything weird. Then the whistle returned. This time, outside my second-floor bedroom window. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. That window was 12 feet off the ground. I listened hard. Silence. Maybe I imagined it. Then, another whistle. Soft, slow, identical to before. I slid off the bed and crept toward the window. My legs felt like wet sand. Goosebumps crawled up my arms. I did that thing where you move inch by inch until only your eyes peek over the sill. And there he was, a man, standing on the slanted part of the roof outside my window. He wasn't wearing a clown costume. This wasn't the same guy, but somehow he was worse. Dirty jeans, flannel shirt ripped at the sleeve, hair messy like he'd slept in the woods. His face, blank, expressionless, like he wasn't even a person. He stared right at me. His lips slowly tightened. Then, he whistled. That same tune, perfectly clear. I stumbled back and nearly tripped over my desk chair. Jesus, holy shit, holy shit. I grabbed my phone and called my friend Jared. He answered half asleep. Bro, the hell you want? There's someone on my freaking roof. Quit messin'. I'm not kidding. He's right outside my window. Call the cops, dumbass. I peeked again. He was gone. Just gone. No footsteps, no sound, no shadow. The roof was empty. A week passed. Quiet. Too quiet. Then one night, maybe 2 a.m., I heard a single whistle from downstairs. Just one. Short, sharp, right beneath my bedroom floor. That was all it took. I grabbed my backpack, my dad's old pocket knife, my phone charger, and I ran out the front door barefoot. I sprinted straight to Jared's house and banged on his window until he let me crash on his floor. I didn't go home for 3 days. When I finally did, daytime with Jared by my side, we found footprints in the backyard dirt leading to the house. Not clown boots, bare feet, human, dirty, wide steps like someone tall. The police checked. They found nothing else. No intruder, no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints. But the footprints were real. The whistle was real. The man on the roof was real. I'm 22 now, and I still don't stay in that house alone. Even when my parents ask, I make up excuses. And sometimes, late at night, in whatever apartment I'm living in, I'll hear a whistle outside my window. Just one note. Short, sharp, like a reminder, a promise, a warning. I don't know which scares me more. I had always thought the quiet looked innocent. People talk about the middle of nowhere, like it's some peaceful fantasy, fresh air, long stretches of land, no noise except the kind nature wants to make. But when you grow up surrounded by nothing but barbed wire fences, wind-torn fields, and a winter that feels like God forgot to turn the lights back on, you learn something real quick. Silence can lie, and sometimes silence is the loudest warning you'll ever get. My name is Lyndon Hale, and the year everything happened, I had just turned 18. We lived about 12 miles outside a tiny Montana town called Ridgewater Bluff. The kind of place people only remember because it has a gas station with decent coffee and a bar that stays open way too late. The nearest neighbor was half a mile down the gravel road. And by neighbor, I mean a 70-year-old rancher who talked to his cows more than people. Dad, Rory Hale, was one of those men built like hard work, broad shoulders, tobacco voice, the kind of guy who fixed fences before breakfast and yelled at the weather like it owed him money. He wasn't mean, just carved out of old-school stubbornness. Guns were his hobby, his pride, his comfort. He treated the shooting range behind the barn like most dads treated living rooms. Me? I was the opposite. I'd rather be inside, headphones on, hoodie tighter than a burrito wrap, pretending the world outside didn't exist. Dad called me soft. Mom used to call me thoughtful, but she left when I was 13, so Dad's word stuck harder. But even if I didn't like it, the land was home, and the night I almost died on it, I learned something I've never forgotten. You don't need a monster to be terrified. Sometimes a stranger is enough. That winter had teeth. It was January, the kind of cold where your bones ache even inside the house. Dad had gone out with some old friends at a bar in Ridgewater Bluff. A real dive bar, wood panels, neon beer signs, and a bartender who called everyone hun, whether she meant it or not. Before leaving, Dad slapped on his coat and pointed at me. Lock up after dark, yeah? And don't forget the back latch. Last week, the wind damn near tore it off. Yeah, I got it, I said. He opened the door, cold air rushing in, making the lights flicker. Before he stepped out, he added, "If anything feels off, call me. Don't be a hero. Dad, nothing ever happens out here." I muttered. He scoffed under his breath. "That's what people say, till something does." And then he was gone. There's something I need to say before the story moves forward. Something that might make the rest make more sense. When I was 10, we had an incident. A man nobody knew his name wandered onto our property in the middle of the night. He kept mumbling that he lived here, that we were in his home. Dad had to chase him off with a rifle. The sheriff found him 2 days later under an overpass miles away, half frozen and muttering nonsense. People said he wasn't dangerous, just wrong in the head. But ever since then, Dad kept every door locked. Every night. And every once in a while, I'd catch him staring out the windows like he expected someone to be staring back. I used to think he was paranoid. After what happened, I don't think that anymore. That night, the heater was blasting like it was fighting for its life, and I was on the couch, burrito wrapped in a blanket, watching old TV reruns. The kind of comfort shows you put on when the world feels quiet enough to swallow you whole. Around 11:40 p.m., my phone buzzed. At first I ignored it, thinking it was just a notification. Then it buzzed again, and again. Ring motion detected at your door. My stomach sank before I even saw it. Calls it instinct or dread. I tapped the notification. The screen showed darkness, snowflakes darting across the lens, and a shape. A tall figure stood just beyond the glow of the porch light, not moving, not shivering, just standing. My first thought wasn't fear. It was Dad. Drunk, needing help. Maybe he forgot his keys. But then the figure leaned slightly forward, just enough for the light to brush their chin. Not Dad. Too tall. Wrong posture. Wrong clothes. A thin jacket. No hat. No gloves. In 20-degree weather? No one does that. No one normal. I whispered to myself. Who the hell? I turned up the phone volume slightly. The ring mic crackled. The stranger wasn't talking. Wasn't knocking. Just breathing. Slow. Like someone listening for something inside the house. My own breath stalled. After about 20 seconds of that unsettling stillness, the figure slowly, almost gently, stepped backward into the dark. Gone, but not gone enough. For a few minutes, I didn't move. Then, scratch, from the kitchen window. Not loud, not aggressive, just deliberate, like someone tracing their nails across the glass. Testing it, the kind of sound that goes straight down your spine. Fuck. No, I whispered. My hands shook as I locked the front door and every window in the living room. The kitchen was across the house, and every step toward it felt like walking into a freezer. The scratching stopped. I peeked around the corner. Not fully, just enough to see the window. I saw grooves. Light, fresh grooves carved into the frost on the outside glass. And then, thud, thud, thud. The entire side of the house shook. Pictures rattled. A lamp flickered. Something outside was beating the wall hard enough to leave dents. Dad, please pick up, I muttered as I dialed him. No answer. Voicemail. The pounding stopped. The silence afterward was somehow worse. That silence lasted only 5 seconds. Crash. Glass shattered upstairs my floor. I froze. Then I ran. Up the stairs so fast I almost slipped. Dad's door. His safe. Password. The year Mom left. He never changed it. My hands trembled as I typed it. Safe clicked open. The shotgun stared back at me. I swear to God, I better not fuck this up, I muttered. I loaded 3 shells, hands shaking so violently I dropped one on the carpet. A gust of wind came from the hallway. No, not wind. A presence. My breath stopped as I stepped out of Dad's room, shotgun raised. Snowflakes drifted inside from my bedroom. The window was shattered outward, glass on the inside. Something had been dragged in the snow below. Feathers. Blood. One of our chickens lay crumpled in the yard, its neck twisted wrong. And then, movement. A figure crouched by the broken fence, half hidden in the shadow of the shed. The same tall man from the camera. He was licking something off his hand. My stomach twisted. He heard the click of my shotgun as I lifted it. His head snapped toward me. And even from a distance, I swear to God, he smiled. "Get the hell away," I yelled, voice cracking. I fired. The shot echoed across the property. Snow erupted near him, but I missed. The stranger bolted into the tree line like he'd been waiting for me to shoot. The darkness swallowed him whole. I stood there shaking so hard the shotgun almost slipped from my hands. Dad arrived 10 minutes later, tires skidding on the icy gravel. I met him at the door, shaking. He looked at the broken window, the footprints, the chicken, the shell casing near my feet. For the first time in my life, Dad looked scared. He didn't call the cops. He didn't yell. He didn't even check the barn. He just said quietly, "Pack a bag. We're not staying here tonight." "Dad, who was that guy?" He didn't answer. He just kept staring into the dark tree line like something might step out and answer for him. We moved out 2 months later, sold the property for half what it was worth. Dad never said it outright, but I know now. He'd seen something like that stranger before, something he hoped would never come back. And maybe it didn't, but every winter night since then, when the wind hits the side of whatever place I live in, I swear I hear it, that slow scratch on the glass, just checking, just waiting, maybe for me, maybe for the next person. Whoever that stranger was, I pray no one ever has to meet him. I never thought the quiet suburbs of Sacramento could feel threatening. I grew up around them, streets lined with toy-littered driveways, yellow porch lights glowing like they were permanently stuck on warm welcome, and neighbors who waved even when they didn't remember your name. I always felt safe. Too safe, I guess. But that changed the year I turned 23. I wasn't exactly where a 23-year-old was supposed to be. Most of my high school friends had already moved out, moved in with someone, or moved on with life in general. Meanwhile, I was still living in my childhood home at the edge of a cul-de-sac that kids used to race scooters in. It wasn't because I was lazy or stuck. It was simple. My mom refused to take rent, and I refused to turn down free rent in California. If she wanted to call it helping me get on my feet, fine. If I wanted to call it being smart, even better. My older sister, Raina, had left for college 2 years earlier. Since then, the house had become this strangely quiet place, cleaner, calmer, maybe a little lonelier than I wanted to admit. I didn't realize how much noise she used to bring with her until none of it was around anymore. It was a Friday evening in late September when everything happened. The kind of warm night California gets after sunset, crickets buzzing, air thick with leftover heat, faint smell of dry grass drifting in through the open windows. My girlfriend, Elise, had come over after her shift. She worked at a small coffee shop off Folsom Boulevard, a place that smelled like old books and blended espresso. She'd only stayed an hour because her roommate was having a meltdown about her ex again. Her words, not mine. "Hey," she said before leaving, putting her shoes on near the door. "Text me if you get bored. I don't want you falling asleep and forgetting to eat again." I laughed. "I literally ordered pizza. I'll be fine. You always say that, and then you wake up starving at 3 a.m. She wasn't wrong. She kissed me goodnight, waved, and left around 10. The house fell quiet almost instantly. Mom was out of town, some conference in San Diego, and she'd told me earlier in the day that Raina was planning to swing by sometime this weekend but didn't know when. Cool. I loved my sister, but I also loved privacy. If she wanted to pop in, fine, but I wasn't planning my day around her mystery arrival. I cracked open a cold beer, threw myself onto the couch, and put on some random horror movie I'd watched a dozen times before. Halfway through, I grabbed another beer, then another. I wasn't drunk, just warm, loose around the edges. The kind of buzz that makes you sink deeper into couches. At some point, the movie ended. Another auto played. I didn't bother checking which one. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember was the sound. Skirk, skirk, skirk. Something dragging across the front patio. I opened my eyes halfway, not exactly alarmed. I'd heard raccoons out there before, or branches, or packages being misplaced. Or hell, maybe I imagined it. The sound came again. Skrrk. Then the doorknob jiggled. I lifted my head lazily. My brain fogged. Click. The front door creaked open. Instead of panicking, my exhausted, buzzed brain relaxed because the door was locked, and the only people with keys were Mom, me, and Raina. I called out, voice raspy. "Raina? That you?" No response. My eyes adjusted, and I turned toward the door. A thin woman stepped in, not exactly short, but frail-looking, with hair longer than I remembered my sister's ever being. She stood in the dim light like she didn't fully recognize where she was, and she was dragging something dark and soft-looking that thumped with each movement. A duffel bag. Maybe Raina just upgraded her style. Who knew? "Hey," I mumbled, waving half-heartedly. "You could have texted you were coming in tonight." She didn't answer. She didn't even look at me. She walked straight toward the stairs, slow and stiff. The thing she dragged knocked against each step. Thud, thud, thud. My eyelids felt like weights. My brain didn't interpret anything correctly. I figured she was exhausted from traveling. I figured I'd talk to her in the morning. I closed my eyes again. I woke up sometime around midnight, this time to chaos. Bang. Clank. Crash. It came from the kitchen, someone rummaging, slamming cabinets, throwing things. I jerked upright on the couch. My heart thudded painfully, partly from the noise, partly from the sudden realization that something felt wrong, really wrong. I reached for my phone on the coffee table. The screen lit up with notifications. One from Mom. 8 minutes ago. Mom. "Hey, sweetheart. Can you pick up Raina from the train station tomorrow morning around 8? She said her hotel's pretty far, so a ride would help." My stomach dropped. I typed back quickly. "Me. She's already home." "Thought you knew?" Another crash came from the kitchen. Then my phone buzzed with a reply. "Mom? What? No, she isn't. She just updated me from her hotel 50 miles away." My blood turned into ice water. The banging in the kitchen stopped. Dead silent. Then slow footsteps. Dragging. Wet rubber soles squeaking against the hardwood. My breathing hitched. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling. The footsteps grew closer. Closer. I turned toward the kitchen doorway. And she appeared. Not my sister. Not even close. The woman stepped into the living room with the flickering blue light of the TV washing over her face. She looked starved, skin tight, bones sharp, cheeks sunken. Her hair was tangled, uneven, like it had been torn out in clumps. Her eyes darted around, too wide, too bright. She held a Tupperware container of leftover soup. She was shoveling it into her mouth with her bare hands, slurping, panting, muttering between each disgusting scoop. My body locked with terror. I took a step back. Her head snapped toward me with unnatural speed. "Oh," she said loudly, her voice high and broken. "There you are. There you are. There you are. Thought I lost you. Thought you were in the wall. You look different now. Did you know that? Did you know you look different?" I didn't breathe. She walked toward me, soup dripping down her chin, her expression manic, smiling too wide, then suddenly frowning like she forgot why she smiled. I bolted. She shriek-laughed and followed me, her footsteps chaotic, fast, then slow, then fast again. I ran into the hallway and locked myself inside the downstairs bathroom. I stumbled back against the far wall and pressed a hand over my mouth, trying to silence my breathing. Through the crack under the door, I saw her feet dirty, cracked, blackened like she'd walked miles barefoot. She stopped right in front of the door. Silence. Then, "Hehehehe. Oh my God. Oh my God, I found you." Her giggle pitched up and down, bouncing between childlike and deranged. After nearly a minute, her giggles turned to sobbing. She pressed her forehead against the door. The wood creaked. She banged her head, softly at first, then harder. Thud, thud, thud. I shook violently. I texted Mom. "Me. There's someone in the house. Not Raina. I'm in the bathroom. Calling police." I dialed 911 with shaking hands. The operator stayed calm. I tried to match her voice with my own, but mine kept cracking. Outside the door, the woman stopped hitting her head, Then she whispered, fast, rambling, gibberish, words tripping over each other. "You're not him. You're not him. You look like him, but you're not him. He said he'd be home. He said he'd be in the walls. Do you hear them in the walls too? Do you hear them breathing under the floor? Your eyes are wrong. Your eyes are wrong." I pressed both hands over my ears. Then, sirens. She froze. Her feet turned. She sprinted down the hallway, slamming into a wall, stumbling, then bolting toward the back door. It felt like an eternity before the cops knocked. When they finally opened the bathroom door, I collapsed forward into the hallway, trembling so hard I couldn't stand. They didn't find her that night, but a few days later, they told me she was found wandering behind a closed-down motel off a freeway. She was homeless, mentally unstable after years of drug abuse and trauma. They transferred her to a psychiatric institution. They said I was safe, but I never felt safe again. Now, every time a door opens, every time I hear footsteps, even if it's just the house settling, something inside me tightens. At night, I sleep lightly, gripping one of the makeshift weapons I've hidden around the house. Kitchen knife under the pillow, baseball bat behind the door, wrench in the top drawer. Mom says I overreact. Maybe I do. Or maybe you can't unlearn the feeling of someone else's breath on the other side of a bathroom door. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Someone who was smiling at you like they already lived inside your nightmares. Someone who could have stayed longer. Someone who maybe never fully left. I never thought of myself as the paranoid type. If anything, people always said I was too trusting for my own good. Growing up in a small town outside Ridgefall, Missouri, I had the kind of childhood where neighbors waved at you even when they didn't remember your name, and the local diner still served coffee in chipped ceramic mugs like it was 1978. But things changed fast after my parents split when I was 17. My mom moved to another state, and my dad drowned himself in work, leaving our old house hollow and quiet. I moved out as soon as I could, not because I hated home, but because I hated the silence that lived in it. At 24, I finally found a place I could afford. A second-floor, two-bedroom apartment in a worn-out complex called Cedar Ridge Flats. Nothing fancy. Beige siding, a parking lot full of rusting sedans, and stairwells that echoed like concrete caves. But the rent was cheap, the AC worked, and the porch had a screened enclosure where I could sit late at night and smoke without the complex manager giving me grief. My roommate, Lila Carver, was an overworked barista who spent half her nights at her boyfriend's place. She and I weren't best friends or anything, just two people splitting rent. But when she wasn't home, the apartment felt too quiet, too still. Like the air itself was listening. That night started like every other lonely night. Microwaved leftovers, a half-drained bottle of iced tea, Netflix running some show I'd stopped caring about 3 episodes ago, and the fuzzy buzz of my nicotine craving pulling me toward the porch. I remember thinking, it's just another normal night. Chill. Stop overthinking everything. God, I wish I hadn't told myself that. The porch had walls up to my waist. When I sat down to smoke, everything below that wall disappeared from view: the parking lot, the walkway, the street-facing units. I liked that. It felt private, like being in my own tiny world. I lit my cigarette, leaned back in the old wicker chair, and just let my mind drift. The crickets were loud that night. Missouri summers always had a way of humming, like nature had a heartbeat. The air smelled like wet asphalt and someone grilling 2 buildings over. I was halfway through my smoke when I heard it. A faint crunch of gravel. Not unusual. People walked their dogs at all hours. Cars came and went, but there was something slow about the footsteps. Not steady, more like someone drifting, wandering with no destination in mind. The kind of walk you'd hear from someone who wasn't trying to get home. Just moving. I didn't look over the wall. Didn't think I needed to. But the second I put out my cigarette, stood up, and closed the sliding door, the habit kicked in. I looked back and froze. Someone was standing in the parking lot. Someone staring directly at me. Even from 50 feet away, I recognized him. Not because I knew him personally, but because you noticed him. Everyone in the complex did. His name I never learned. But people referred to him as that drifter dude, or the guy who wanders. Mid-20 seconds, pale, shoulder-length black hair, baggy clothes, and eyes that seemed to slide over people like he wasn't fully convinced they were real. He muttered to himself sometimes, walked straight down the middle of the asphalt road like cars weren't a thing, gazed into empty spaces like he was watching something only he could see. Harmless? That's what everyone said. Until that moment. Because now, he wasn't just wandering. He was watching me. His head tilted slightly, like an animal catching a scent. I shut the blinds so fast they rattled. My chest tightened. My fingers felt numb, but I forced myself to breathe. He's just weird, not dangerous. Chill. But something in my gut whispered, don't ignore this. I tried watching my show again. Tried pretending everything was fine. But that feeling, that crawling sensation under my skin just wouldn't leave. 30 minutes passed before I caved. I walked slowly to the blinds, lifted one slat with my fingertip, and peeked outside. My stomach dropped so hard I almost gagged. He was still there, and closer. No blinking, no pacing, just standing, facing my apartment. I grabbed my phone and FaceTimed Lila. She answered with messy hair and a guy's arm around her shoulder. "What's up?" she slurred. "Lila," I whispered. "That dude, the drifter, he's been standing outside my building for like an hour. He's looking at my apartment." She giggled. "You're freaking yourself out again." "It's fine, babe." I glared at the screen. "Can you take this seriously?" Okay, she sighed, dramatically. "Flip the camera." "Fine." I stepped onto the porch and froze so hard I forgot how to breathe. He wasn't there. Gone. Completely vanished. "See," Lila said. "You're good. Just go to bed." She hung up before I could argue. Relief mixed with humiliation. God, I hated being dismissed like that. Maybe he left. Maybe it was all just weird timing. I went to the kitchen to make tea. I figured something warm might calm me down. But as I poured boiling water into the mug, I heard it rattle. A short metallic shake. Then another. My blood turned to ice. It was the front doorknob. Someone was trying to open it. I crept to the door, heart punching my ribs. I looked through the peephole. It was him, 5 inches from my door. Eyes vacant, face expressionless, hand still on the knob. And the second my eye touched the peephole, the second he sensed movement, he stopped rattling. He leaned forward, ever so slightly, and stared straight into the peephole, into me. I stumbled backward, nearly slipping on the linoleum. No. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. The dispatcher kept her voice calm, but I could hear the tension in it. "Stay away from the door. Officers are en route." I hid behind the couch, knees pulled to my chest. When the cops finally arrived, lights flashing, radios crackling, the guy was long gone. They shrugged it off. "He's probably drunk. Wrong apartment. Happens." I hated that answer. Hated how easily they dismissed things that made every nerve in my body scream danger. After the cops left, I called Lila again and begged her to come home. "I'm not driving back," she mumbled. "Just relax. Lock the doors." I felt tears burning in my eyes. "Fine. Whatever." I called my friend Taryn, and thank God she said she would come right away. Until she arrived, I sat on the couch with the lights off, listening to every creak, every hum, every whisper of wind. Then, a new sound. Scraping, long and slow along the porch screen, like claws dragging across mesh, or fingers testing weak spots. I held my breath, stood up, pulled the blinds just an inch, and my heart flat out stopped. He was on my porch, punching through the screen with his bare fist, crawling inside. No, I screamed so loud my throat tore. He flung one leg over the waist-high wall, eyes wild and shining, and pulled a rock from his pocket. I didn't think, didn't hesitate. I ran out the front door, screaming for help, sprinted down the stairs 2 at a time, and saw Taryn's headlights. I dove into the passenger seat as she yelled, "What the hell happened? Drive, go now." She peeled out of the lot so hard my head slammed the headrest. I called the police again, barely able to speak through the shaking. We waited across the street until we saw patrol cars swarm the complex. Only then did we go back. My sliding door had a spiderweb crack running through it from the rock. The porch screen hung in tatters. Somehow insanely, he'd climbed onto the downstairs porch railing and hoisted himself up to mine. A neighbor later told the cops she saw him sprint into another unit. He wasn't even a resident, just staying with a cousin. When they arrested him, he didn't resist, didn't speak, just stared past everyone like he was watching something float just over their heads. He was sent to a mental health facility after the charges. But even now, even months later, whenever I'm home alone, I hear that sound again. The faint rattle of a doorknob. That shouldn't be moving. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear footsteps in the parking lot. Slow, wandering, searching. I never liked staying alone at night, especially not after what happened when I was 15. It's strange, people always assume the scariest stories come from big cities, dark alleys, shady apartments. But the truth is, nothing gets under your skin like an isolated southern backroad home. The kind where cicadas scream louder than your thoughts, where the nearest neighbor is a half-mile away, and where one wrong shadow outside your window can make your spine feel like ice water. Back then, I lived in a small Tennessee town called Redwood Bend. Population? Maybe 2,000. Most folks worked at the lumber mill, the diner, or the little bait shop near the river. My parents ran a small antique booth out of an old barn. Life was slow, quiet, predictable. That Friday in late summer of '94, the air felt thick, muggy, the kind of heat that made your shirt stick to your back even at sunset. I remember walking out of school, kicking dust off my sneakers, when my best friend Lena Caldwell shouted my name from the bike rack. "Hey, you're still coming over tonight, right?" she yelled, waving so wildly her scrunchie almost flew out. "Yeah," I said, adjusting my backpack. "Your folks still going to Chattanooga?" "Yup, anniversary trip. They won't be back till tomorrow night." Then she grinned. "Which means we can watch whatever the hell we want." She was excited, but I noticed something off her smile had a tremble to it. Lena loved horror movies way more than I ever did, so her being nervous didn't sit right. "You okay?" I asked. She shrugged but didn't meet my eyes. "Just don't want to be alone. That's all." At the time, I didn't think much of it. I should have. God, I should have. Lena's house was old, built in the 1952, sitting at the end of a long gravel road behind the Baptist church and right next to the Miller Cemetery, which locals claimed was older than the whole damn county. Whenever I spent the night there, I always joked, "Girl, why the hell would your parents buy a house beside a freaking graveyard?" But she'd always say the same thing. "Because the dead don't bother nobody. That's why." Still, something about that property always felt wrong. The woods behind the cemetery never seemed to move with the wind. No crickets, no night birds, just silence, heavy, uncomfortable silence. The house layout mattered, because it saved us and almost got us killed. Here's how it was built. Pull into the gravel driveway carport on the right. Front door, tiny porch, living room. Carport door leads directly into kitchen. Stairs next to the kitchen go down to the basement bedrooms. Basement. To the left, laundry area. Straight ahead, Lena's room. Past her room, storage closet. Next to that, her older brother's old room. To the right, sliding glass door leading to backyard and cemetery fence. The important part, Lena's bedroom window sat exactly at ground level. You could crouch and look straight in. And someone did. We got to her place around 4:30 p.m. Her parents hugged her, handed her emergency numbers, reminded us not to burn the house down, and drove off in their old blue Buick. The moment they left, Lena tried to act cheerful. "Popcorn, soda, scary movie marathon, let's do it," she said, flicking on the living room TV. We threw our backpacks in her room, laughed about school drama, ate junk food, listened to music, just two dumb teenagers doing dumb teenage things. But around 8:30 p.m., everything changed. I remember lying on her bed, head resting against the window because the frame was cool from the evening air. I wasn't even thinking, just listening to her rant about some girl at school. And then, she says she didn't take the note, but I'm swearing to God. Thunk. My head jerked. The window vibrated. My heart dropped into my stomach. Lena frowned. What was that? I sat up slowly. I don't know. Something hit the window. She reached over and turned the music down. Silence. And then, thunk. Thunk. Lena froze. Tell me you heard that, I whispered. She whispered back. Yeah. I definitely heard that. Both of us held our breath. Another noise came. Not a bang this time. Not a hit. A dragging sound. Slow. Heavy. Right outside her window. My entire body went cold. Lena, something's out there. She grabbed my arm. Come on. Come on, she whispered, voice shaking. We ran to her brother's old room farther from the window and she grabbed the landline phone. I'm calling 911, she whispered. Are you sure? I asked. What if it's just a raccoon or something? No raccoon hits a window twice like that, she snapped. Shut up, I'm calling. She dialed. 911. What's your emergency? Lena stuttered. Hi. Yeah, we're home alone and someone's outside our window, I swear. 911. All right, honey, calm down for me. Are all your doors locked? Lena looked at me. We both realized at the same time. The sliding glass door downstairs had no curtains, and anyone outside could see straight in. 911. Girls, I need you to go upstairs. Do not stay in the basement. Lena nodded frantically. Okay, we're going up. 911. An officer is on the way. Stay on the line. But panic got the best of her. She hung up. 5 seconds later, the phone rang again. We jumped out of our skin. She answered. Hello? 911. Do not hang up until the officer arrives. We apologized, sprinted upstairs, heartbeats pounding so loud it felt like they echoed. But then, a bark. Her dog, Maggie, barked so violently it sounded like she was ready to tear through the door. She's outside, Lena gasped. I forgot she's outside. Don't open the door, I begged. Please, Lena. Don't. I can't leave her out there, she cried. What if something happens to her? We stood there arguing while Maggie barked like she was looking the devil in the eye. Lena sobbed. I have to get her. I grabbed her hand. I'm going with you. We crept to the sliding glass door. The backyard light flickered once, twice, then steadied. Maggie was scratching the glass like crazy. Lena whispered, 1, 2, 3. She yanked the door open just enough. Maggie bolted inside. Lena slammed it shut, locked it, and we sprinted upstairs without looking back. We hid in the kitchen, crouched behind the counter, listening. 10 minutes crawled by. Then headlights filled the carport. But it wasn't the police. It was her parents. They walked inside laughing until they saw us shaking in the kitchen. What the hell is going on? Her dad asked. Before we could answer, the police car pulled up. Her dad sighed. Great. What'd y'all do? We explained everything. The officer stepped outside with a flashlight. Lena and I waited in the doorway, hugging Maggie, praying he'd say it was nothing. But he didn't. He walked back slowly, face pale. Sir, ma'am, kids, someone was definitely outside. Lena's mom grabbed her chest. Oh Lord. The officer continued. There's muddy footprints leading from the cemetery fence to the bedroom window. Then to your front door. Lena clutched my arm. I felt sick. Someone had been watching us, listening, waiting. We finally calmed down enough to go downstairs and try to sleep. Her parents slept upstairs. Maggie stayed at our feet. We were just starting to drift off when, Maggie exploded into barking again. Before we could get up, her dad came barreling down the stairs, shotgun in hand. He threw open the sliding glass door and screamed, Hey, you get your ass out of my yard. Lena and I froze. A shadow, tall, thin, darted across the backyard and leapt over the fence into the cemetery. Her dad cursed and ran outside, but the figure disappeared into the gravestones. That's when we noticed something else. The latch on the backyard storage shed was hanging open. Someone had been in there, maybe for hours, maybe longer. Lena whispered, voice trembling. Who the hell was that? I couldn't answer. I didn't know. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If Maggie hadn't barked earlier, if we hadn't called 911, if we hadn't gone upstairs, we might not have been alive. The cops searched the cemetery and woods for hours. They never found the man. But the footprints, the shed door, the window, the noise, the shadow, it was real, too real. And even now, 30 years later, I still think about it, about how someone had been crouched at that ground-level window, watching two teenage girls laugh, gossip, eat popcorn, just waiting for the right moment, a moment that thankfully never came. But sometimes, late at night, when I hear a thud outside my house, my mind goes back to that humid Tennessee night, the sliding glass door, the backyard cemetery, the shadow sprinting through gravestones, and I realize some strangers don't knock. They wait, patient, silent, watching. I was 16 the first time I realized that being alone in a house isn't the same thing as being safe in one. Back then, in our little part of Longridge Hills, California, a quiet slice of suburbia tucked between dry canyons and eucalyptus groves, I actually loved it when my parents weren't home. Everyone around us worked long commutes, so empty houses weren't unusual. Ours sat near the end of Arroyo Circle, a winding street where every house looked the same shade of sun-faded beige. To me, being home alone meant freedom. No one nagging me about the TV volume, no reminders about chores, no awkward family dinners where everyone ate while scrolling through their phones pretending to bond. I'd microwave some leftover pizza, put on whatever I wanted to watch, and fall asleep whenever I felt like it. I didn't realize how much I romanticized the idea of solitude until the night everything changed. Back then, I had just started my junior year at Longridge High. I wasn't popular, but I wasn't a ghost either. I had a couple of friends, got decent grades, worked part-time at a car wash down on Ventura Road. I wasn't some brooding kid with a tragic past. I was pretty average. My parents, however, were always tense. They fought, not in a screaming, plate-throwing way, but in that exhausted married people way where you could tell they were just done. Dad worked overnight shifts at a distribution warehouse in Oxnard, and Mom worked at a clinic in Camarillo, often covering late hours. So most nights, the house was mine. I used to think that was a blessing. I didn't know how wrong I was. That night started exactly like the 100 nights before it. I grilled a cheap frozen burrito. I scrolled TikTok and YouTube. I played a few matches of Apex on my old Xbox, and I eventually wandered to my room. I remembered yawning, tossing my hoodie on a chair, and collapsing into bed. The last thing I remember was checking the time, 11:42 p.m. What woke me wasn't movement, it wasn't light, it wasn't even fear. It was a voice. A low, raspy man's voice somewhere outside speaking nonstop, like a recitation. At first I thought it was part of a dream, one of those weird half-asleep audio hallucinations. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. Not a dream, not in my head. A real voice, a man's voice, praying, deliver us, protect, from the shadow, keep the doorway open. His words were muffled, but I could make out bits. His tone was hoarse, desperate, like someone who had been speaking for hours. It was the sound of a person who wasn't praying out of faith but out of fear. And the moment I realized that, my stomach dropped. I snapped awake, heart already pounding. My brain took a second to register where I was. My bed, my room, my house. I wasn't dreaming. The praying was coming from right outside my window. A single wave of cold swept from my scalp through my entire body so fast that my teeth clenched from the chill. I had never heard anything like that, not that tone, not that desperation, not that wrongness. Who the hell? I whispered to myself. I slowly sat up. The voice continued. Let the vessel be prepared. Let him open the air. Let him receive. Not normal praying, not even close. I slid off the bed, feet cold on the hardwood floor, and tiptoed toward my window. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed not to, but I also couldn't not look. I grabbed the curtain with 2 shaking fingers and pulled it back half an inch, just enough to see, just enough to regret it immediately. In the dim glow of the backyard sensor light, a man was kneeling on our patchy lawn, hunched over like something had broken him down into the shape of a question mark. He was almost naked, wearing only a pair of tight, off-white briefs. His skin was pale and sagging, his back covered in coarse gray hair. His breathing was heavy and rhythmic, each inhale sharp, each exhale trembling. In his hands, he clutched something black, a Bible. He wasn't reading it. He wasn't even looking at it. He just held it against his forehead like he thought the thing could stop him from exploding. "Open. Open. Open," he whispered. My throat tightened. My pulse hammered. I felt like my soul tried to curl inward. I tapped the glass lightly. "Hey," I said, trying to sound less terrified than I was. "Sir, this is my house. You need to leave. You need to." He stopped praying mid-word. His head lifted, and when his eyes met mine, something inside me clenched in a way I can't put into words. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't confused. They weren't even curious. They were empty. Completely empty. Like he wasn't looking at me, but through me. He stared for a good 5 seconds. 5 seconds where my heart didn't beat. Then, without speaking, without blinking, he looked down again and kept praying. Louder now. I panicked. I slammed my palm against the window. "Hey, get out of here. Now." This time, he paused again. Slowly, he rose to his feet too slowly, like his joints weren't working right, and walked away. Not ran, not startled, just walked, calmly, around the side of the house, out of sight. I stood frozen for maybe 10 seconds before adrenaline kicked me into motion. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, forcing my legs not to shake as I left my room and walked toward the kitchen. My breathing was shallow, chest tight. I wanted water. I wanted light. I wanted something normal. But the moment I reached the kitchen window facing the backyard, I felt it in my gut, the certainty. He wasn't gone. This wasn't over. I leaned closer to the glass, trying to see through the darkness. The yard was silent. Still. Then I saw movement. But not the naked guy. Someone else. A man stepped into view, illuminated by the faint glow of our motion light. He was wearing a full black clerical outfit, complete with a Roman collar. His hair was neat, his posture straight, his expression calm. He looked like the kind of person you'd see giving last rites in a movie. He carried a Bible too. He stopped 3 feet from the window, looked directly at me, and spoke with a gentle, practiced voice. "Good evening," he said. "May I have a word of prayer with you at your front door, my friend?" My skin crawled. No priest knocked on doors at almost 1 in the morning. Not here. Not anywhere. I swallowed. No. No, sir. I'm fine. I insist," he replied softly. "A word. That's all." I reached up, grabbed the blinds, and dropped them shut in his face. Then I backed away. My legs felt weak. My breath hissed between my teeth like I couldn't fully exhale. I moved to the living room and sat on the couch, clutching the blanket tighter around myself. What the hell is happening? Not even a minute passed. Then, knock, 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 at the back door. I jumped to my feet and looked through the peephole. The priest was there, and behind him, pacing back and forth like a caged animal, was the nearly naked praying man. My heart pounded loud enough to drown out the drumming on the door. I forced myself to speak. "Go away," I shouted. The priest cupped his hand to his ear. "I'm sorry. I can't hear you," he called back, even though we both knew he could. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the lock. I went to the window beside the back door, slid it open an inch, and practically screamed, "Leave, both of you, right now." The priest looked genuinely sad. "Son," he said, voice soft as wet paper, "we only want to pray. Please. My friend here suffers terribly from compulsions. He needs to pray with a stranger when he's like this. It is the only thing that brings him peace. Please, open your heart. I stared at the friend. The half-naked man had stopped pacing. He was staring straight at me again. His breathing was so heavy I could see his chest rising and falling like he'd run a marathon. His eyes, God, those eyes, empty but hungry, cold but wild, like something in him wanted something from me. I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm calling the police." I started closing the window. That's when the priest lunged. He shoved his hand through the gap and grabbed the window frame, trying to force it open. His fingers were cold, shockingly cold. "Let us in," he shouted, voice no longer gentle. I slammed the window down on his hand. Once, twice. He yanked it back, snarling in pain. I locked the window so fast I fumbled the latch. "I'm calling the cops," I screamed through the glass. But when I turned around, they were gone. Just like that. Vanished into the darkness of the yard. I called 911 immediately. My voice shook, and the dispatcher kept asking me to slow down. I told them everything, every detail I could force out. By the time 2 officers arrived, the backyard was empty, the footprints already fading into the dry dirt. They searched around the property, the street, the side yards, but the strangers were long gone. One of the officers, a guy named Deputy Strickland, took notes while the other poked around with a flashlight. "You're sure they weren't neighbors?" Strickland asked. "No," I said firmly. "I've never seen either of them." He nodded slowly, expression thoughtful but tight. "We had a break-in 2 streets over last night," he said. "No forced entry. Homeowner swore he saw someone outside his bedroom window. Could be the same guys, but the priest outfit? That's new." Behind him, the second officer called out. "Nothing. No tracks, no prints. Yard's clean." Strickland exhaled hard. "We'll patrol the area for a bit," he said. "But if you see anything at all, you call us." I nodded, but inside I felt hollow, because I knew these men weren't trying to rob me. Their eyes, their behavior, the sick calmness, it wasn't about money or belongings. It was about me, what they wanted from me. I truly didn't want to know. I didn't tell my parents. Looking back, that was stupid. But at 16, you cling to your independence like it's oxygen. Instead, for weeks, I stayed awake until sunrise. I jumped at every noise. I avoided windows. I kept the blinds closed. I slept on the couch with the TV on just for comfort. And even though they never came back, it always felt like they might. Just when I finally started sleeping normally again, it happened. I came home from school one Friday afternoon. It was hot, late August heat, the kind that sticks to your skin like glue. The house smelled like furniture polish and laundry detergent. Mom must have cleaned earlier. I threw my backpack onto the couch and walked into the kitchen to grab something to drink. I stopped cold. On the kitchen counter, right beneath the window, lay something black. A Bible. Not ours. We didn't own one. My stomach flipped. I picked it up with trembling hands. Inside, the front cover was a handwritten note. Not a message. A name. The praying man's name. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. And beneath it, "We'll come back when the door is ready." I dropped the book like it burned me. My throat tightened. My heartbeat stuttered. Cold panic soaked through every inch of me. They had been inside the house. They had been inside. I staggered back, chest tightening, air thinning. My vision blurred as tears pricked my eyes. I ran outside, phone shaking in my hand, dialing 911 again. When deputies arrived, they tried to calm me, tried to ask questions, tried to reassure me. But deep down, I knew the truth. They weren't just strangers. They weren't just intruders. They believed I was something meant for them, something they needed, something they were preparing for. And they'd be back. Not that night, not the next, but someday, some night, when the door was ready, whatever that meant. I'm 23 now, living in a different city, different house, different everything, but I still check the windows twice before bed. I still feel sick when I hear someone singing or chanting at night. I still wake up sometimes thinking I heard whispering outside. And last week, on my apartment doorstep, I found something, wrapped in brown paper. Inside, a Bible, the same handwriting. Soon. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they believe. I don't know what they want from me. But I know this much. They found me once. Then they found me again. And they will keep finding me. Until whatever they're waiting for happens. I always tell people that the spring I turned 19 was the first time I ever felt truly alone in my life. Not the fun, finally independent, kind of alone you tell your parents about when you move out for college. But that heavy, bone-deep kind that sits behind your ribs and doesn't go anywhere. I'd grown up in a village called Woodwell Ridge, tucked into the mountains of northern Vermont, where the winters lasted 6 months and the black flies owned the summers. My parents ran a tiny antique store on Main Street, and I spent most of my childhood sweeping floors, fixing knickknacks, and telling tourists that no, our rocking chairs didn't come with ghosts included. By 19, I was splitting my time between community college and helping out at the store, trying to save enough money to transfer to UVM. I didn't have much of a social life, mostly because everyone my age either joined the army, moved to Burlington, or started drinking behind the old grain mill until their brains softened. But I didn't mind. Quiet felt natural to me. Too natural, maybe. So when my mom's older sister, Aunt Rosalie, asked if I could house sit for her while she took a long-delayed anniversary trip with her husband to Italy, I jumped at the chance. I told everyone it was because I needed somewhere quiet to study for my psych midterms, which was true, mostly. But the real reason? I wanted to feel what it was like to live somewhere that wasn't cramped or dusty or filled with antique dolls that always looked like they were judging me. Rosalie's place sat on Hemlock Ridge, about 15 minutes outside town, perched high above a valley where fog pooled like milk every morning. She and her husband had money, old money, the kind you pretend you don't notice when people tell you stories about their humble beginnings. The house had 3 floors, a wraparound deck, a basement bigger than our antique shop, and, for some reason, 2 pantries. I figured a week alone there would be a vacation in itself. Study, eat, sleep, feed her overweight cat named Scone. Easy. And it was easy. At first, the first night I stayed there, I almost felt guilty. The kind of guilt you feel when you sit in a stranger's fancy living room and try not to spill anything. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming 2 rooms away. I made pasta, curled up on the leather couch, and flipped between 2 trashy reality shows until I fell asleep. By day 3, I had a routine. Wake up early, brew coffee in Rosalie's absurdly expensive French press, let Scone out onto the deck, review lecture notes, run on the treadmill in the basement, study until my eyes crossed, microwave leftovers, repeat. The only things she asked me to do were bring in the mail, keep the fridge stocked, check the pool filter, and set the house alarm every night. Easy. But something I didn't know at the time, something that wouldn't matter until it was almost too late, was that Rosalie's husband had taken the emergency key card for the alarm system with him, and had forgotten to tell me. On the 4th night, everything went wrong. It was already past midnight when I realized I hadn't eaten dinner. My brain too fried from studying abnormal psych to function. The air smelled faintly like cedar from the deck. And there was that eerie kind of quiet that only exists when you're far up a mountain. No cars, no voices, just wind. I stretched, cracked my knuckles, and stood up. That's when I remembered the alarm. Shit, I muttered. I'd forgotten to set it when dusk hit, which was the only rule Rosalie emphasized twice. The system only arms properly if you lock every door first. She'd warned me before leaving, especially the basement door. The wind likes to rattle it. So I headed for the stairs. But before I did, something in me said, check the cameras first. I don't know why. Maybe intuition, maybe paranoia, maybe the leftover adrenaline from cramming 3 chapters of case studies. Her security system was old but fancy. A small panel in the study, with 6 camera feeds arranged in a grid. Front porch, backyard, poolside, driveway, upstairs hall, basement stairwell. I flicked the monitor on. For a second, all I saw were empty hallways and moonlit deckboards. Then my eyes drifted to the bottom left camera, the basement stairwell. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it. The lighting was bad, grainy, black and white. But then, a shape shifted, and my stomach dropped so hard I felt weightless. A man was standing halfway up the basement stairs, one hand on the railing, the other holding something round and pale that caught the dim light. A balloon. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I didn't think. The man wasn't young. Somewhere mid-40s. Hair shaved close to the scalp, face sunken. A pair of wire-frame glasses crooked on his nose. He wore a thick winter jacket even though it was April. He paused on the stairs as if listening. I covered my mouth with both hands to stifle whatever sound was clawing its way up my throat. After a moment, he kept climbing slow, careful steps like someone trying not to wake a sleeping child. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "Oh my God. Oh my God. Please no." I backed away from the screen so fast I nearly tripped over the rolling chair. My brain exploded with thoughts. Call 911. Hide. Run. Scream. Do something. But I also knew two terrifying truths. Cops in Woodwell Ridge take 15 minutes to reach Hemlock Ridge. I was tiny, absolutely useless in a fight. So if I hid, and he searched, and found me, game over. If I ran, he'd hear the doors. Game over. If I screamed, he'd rush up the stairs and I swallowed hard. Then an idea hit me. A stupid, reckless, borderline suicidal idea. But it was better than nothing. I sprinted quietly to the guest room where I had been studying. Music still played from the Bluetooth speaker, some indie playlist that made me feel smarter than I actually was. I turned the volume all the way up. Then I stomped. Loud, deliberate, every step echoing through the upstairs hall. I forced my voice to sound annoyed, casual, anything but terrified. "Yo, Trent," I shouted. "I swear I heard something downstairs. Grab your jacket and My voice cracked. I winced. "And the damn flashlight from the safe, okay? Just in case." The safe didn't actually have a flashlight. I didn't know anyone named Trent. But this stranger didn't know that. My heart hammered so hard I nearly puked. I waited. No reply from him. Not a footstep. Not a whisper. Only the music pulsing through the walls. I crept back to the study, pulled the door shut, locked it, forced my shaking fingers to hit the monitor button again. What I saw made my knees buckle. The man had reached the kitchen doorway when he froze, body tensing, head tilting toward the ceiling like a hunting dog. He'd heard me. Every part of me screamed, "Please believe it, please believe it, please believe it." Suddenly, he ran, bolted down the stairs, practically threw himself through the basement door. The balloon bounced against his jacket as he sprinted across the backyard. I watched him dart behind the pool, slip through the hedges, and vanish into the tree line. The balloon caught in a current of cold mountain wind and lifted gently into the night sky, drifting toward the valley like something mocking me. That was when the shaking started. Full body trembling, teeth clacking, chest burning, trembling. I forced myself to breathe, forced my legs to work, forced myself downstairs to lock the basement door and finally hit the alarm. Then I called the police. Then my parents. Then Aunt Rosalie. I didn't stop shaking for 2 hours. The police showed up faster than I expected, 12 minutes, not 15, but it felt like an hour. 2 officers swept the house, checked the yard, followed footprints to where they disappeared among the maple trees. One of them, Officer Harlan, asked me gently, "Did he say anything? Try to talk to you? Threaten you?" I shook my head. He just stared. "And the balloon?" he asked. "No clue," I whispered. Maybe he thought. I swallowed. Maybe he thought I was younger. The other officer, a woman named Patel, glanced at me and then at the footage. Her face tightened. "Could be someone trolling for empty houses," she said, "or someone with bad intentions. We've had a few break-ins lately. People get bold when they think a place looks empty." "But my car was in the driveway," I said. Patel hesitated. "Sometimes that doesn't matter." They stayed until almost 4 a.m. checking closets, attic, crawl spaces, everywhere. When they finally left, I locked myself in the master bedroom with Scone curled against my ribs like a warm loaf of bread. I didn't sleep. A full week passed before they caught him, sleeping in his car, at a Price Chopper parking lot, wrapped in a dirty sleeping bag, balloon remnants in the back seat. He told officers he never meant to scare the girl. He just wanted to bring her something nice, as if that explained anything. But here's the part that haunts me. He'd been parking near Hemlock Ridge for 9 nights before that, and he'd watched me sit on the deck, watched me check the pool, watched me haul groceries in, watched and waited. The balloon? He said it was a peace offering. Saying those words made my skin crawl. And even though they arrested him, even though he was taken away, it didn't stop the nightmares, or the feeling of being watched in my own house afterward, or the guilt when my aunt cried and apologized for leaving me alone. A month after the incident, Aunt Rosalie called me over. She looked pale, shaky. She pushed a folder toward me, police follow-up notes. Inside was a single report line highlighted in yellow. Subject admitted to entering residence on 2 prior occasions without being seen. I stared at the words until they blurred. My stomach knotted. 2 prior? I whispered. Rosalie nodded weakly. He said the house felt safe, that he liked watching you study, that he brought the balloon because it reminded him of his little sister. My throat tightened. She continued, tears gathering. He said, he thought you were 14. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't move, because suddenly, every feeling of being watched in those first days, every chill, every whisper of unease, I realized wasn't imagination. He had been inside the house with me, more than once, lingering in hallways, standing in doorways, watching me walk room to room, quiet, patient, waiting. I never told anyone this part, not my parents, not the police, not Rosalie. But the night before they caught him, I found something outside. I'd gone out early to grab the mail. Dew still clung to the grass. Mist pooled at the edge of the driveway, and sitting right on top of the mailbox was a balloon. A single pale balloon tied loosely with twine. No note, no words, just the balloon. I popped it instantly, hands shaking so badly I could barely breathe. But when it burst, something small fell out, a folded scrap of newspaper. The clipping was of an old county fair. Circled in pen was one line, Children's Day, free balloons. I didn't keep it. I threw it into the trash and buried it beneath coffee grounds and eggshells so I'd never have to touch it again. But I still see it sometimes, in dreams, or in the corner of my eye whenever I walk past a party store, or whenever some little kid lets a balloon go and I watch it drift up, up, up into the sky. I'm older now, stronger, still small, still 5'0", still look like a teenager if I don't wear mascara, but I don't live in Woodwell Ridge anymore. I moved as soon as I could, yet sometimes I catch myself glancing at stairwells, at basement doors, at camera monitors in grocery stores, at reflective windows, anywhere someone might be watching and waiting. People always ask me what scares me most, the man himself, or what he planned to do. But that's not it. What scares me most is how easily someone can slip into your life, into your home, into your blind spots. How you can spend days thinking you're safe, thinking you're alone, while someone else walks through your quiet like they belong there. And that night, on Hemlock Ridge, holding one small balloon, someone did.